What we had ending the last ice age was huge climatic changes, which put a lot of moisture into the air, which came down as precipitation with huge thunderstorms, etc. And I think a lot of the erosion that we still see on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure go back to that period.
When humanity opens the chamber beneath the Sphinx, the world will change forever. The statement coming from a child barely 10 years old, Boris Kipriyanovich. In 2004, his words rippled far beyond Russia, capturing headlines and dividing scientists. Many dismissed him as a prodigy lost in fantasy until researchers noticed something unsettling. His description matched long-standing geological data that few outside Egypt had ever seen. Because in 1999, Egypt's Minister of Antiquities, Dr. Zahi Hawass, stood before cameras and declared, "We have discovered a massive structure beneath the Sphinx, multi-leveled, with chambers and corridors." The announcement aired once, then vanished without explanation. Yet records from the 1970s had already hinted at unexplained cavities beneath the monument data that was never followed up and never explained. If every discovery beneath the Sphinx has been buried, what are they really trying to keep from us? Long before the boy from Russia ever spoke of secret chambers, another man half a world away had already drawn the same map. His name was Edgar Cayce, and to millions of Americans in the early 20th century, he was known simply as the Sleeping Prophet. Born in 1877 in rural Kentucky, Cayce possessed an ability that defied science. When he fell into a self-induced trance, he could speak about things he had never studied, diagnosing illnesses, recalling forgotten histories, and describing events that had not yet happened. Over the course of his life, he gave more than 14,000 readings, each one meticulously recorded and archived. Among them were a few that spoke of something far stranger than medicine or religion. They spoke of a lost world, Atlantis. According to Cayce, Atlantis had been a real civilization, a powerful empire destroyed by cataclysm nearly 12,500 years ago. But before it sank, its scholars escaped, carrying with them the knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and sacred geometry. They built 3 repositories to preserve that knowledge, one in Bimini, one in Yucatan, and the last, the greatest, beneath the right paw of the Sphinx. Cayce described it as a hall of records, a hidden archive containing the story of the beginning of mankind, the rise of civilizations, and the destruction of Atlantis itself. He warned that when this chamber was finally opened, it would mark the beginning of a new era. "The hall shall be found," he said, "when humanity is ready to remember what it has forgotten." For decades, archaeologists dismissed the prophecy as fantasy, a mystical tale born from America's obsession with the occult. But Cayce's followers took him seriously. They formed research groups, raised funds, and began searching for proof beneath the sands of Egypt. Most expected to find nothing. Yet what they eventually discovered using instruments far beyond Cayce's time would make even the skeptics pause. Because in 1977, beneath the Giza Plateau, the Earth began to whisper back. By the late 1970s, the prophecy of Edgar Cayce had faded into obscurity, a curiosity for mystics, not scientists. But in 1977, that changed. A small research team from the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the very institute founded to preserve Cayce's work, arrived in Egypt with a new ally, a group of physicists from Stanford University. Their goal was simple, at least on paper, to test Cayce's most controversial claim that a hidden chamber lay beneath the right paw of the Sphinx. For the first time, science would try to listen to the Earth itself. The team deployed instruments that were cutting edge for their time, seismic reflection sensors and ground resistivity meters capable of detecting voids beneath solid rock without a single shovel of sand being moved. For days, they worked in the shadow of the Sphinx, placing sensors across its forelegs and base, feeding data into analog computers the size of cabinets. The readings came slowly, etched as waves of ink on long rolls of thermal paper. And then something unexpected. At depths between 20 and 30 meters, the instruments began to record a consistent anomaly, a rectangular echo that did not match the surrounding bedrock. Its pattern repeated with precision, as though bouncing off a flat, hollow surface. The team checked, recalibrated, and ran the scan again. The result was the same. To the researchers, the signal was unmistakable, a large, empty space, right where Cayce had said it would be. But before they could publish their findings, word reached Cairo. Within days, Egyptian authorities intervened, the excavation site was sealed, and the team was ordered to turn over all of their data to the Department of Antiquities, publicly. Officials announced that the readings were natural cavities in the limestone. Privately, several members of the Stanford group insisted otherwise. One engineer, speaking years later, put it simply, "That wasn't noise, that was architecture." After that, the project was quietly terminated. The equipment was shipped home. The data was never released. But for those who had seen the results, The meaning was clear. The first solid evidence of something beneath the Sphinx had finally been heard. And almost as quickly, it was buried again. A decade after the American team was silenced, another expedition arrived at Giza this time, from the opposite side of the world. In 1987, a research group from Waseda University in Tokyo, led by Professor Sakuji Yoshimura, was granted rare permission to conduct a new underground survey of the Sphinx. Unlike the earlier analog instruments used by the Stanford team, Yoshimura's group brought with them technology that was, for its time, revolutionary ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic pulse scanning, capable of creating detailed three-dimensional models of what lay beneath the desert floor. For weeks, the Japanese scientists worked under the scorching sun, moving their radar antennas inch by inch around the monument's base. As the data streamed in, faint outlines began to appear, lines, curves, and empty pockets that didn't belong to natural rock. The deeper they scanned, the clearer the pattern became. What they found mirrored the findings from a decade earlier, only now. The images were sharper. The data revealed at least 3 hollow spaces inside and beneath the Sphinx. 2 of them appeared within the limestone body itself, geometrically regular in shape, too straight, too uniform to be natural. But it was the third cavity that caught everyone's attention, a massive chamber directly beneath the right paw, extending eastward, precisely where Edgar Cayce had described the Hall of Records. When the team compiled their results, the scans showed walls, edges, and even what looked like corridors branching off at perfect right angles. Yoshimura prepared a detailed report, published a preliminary summary in a Waseda Science journal, and submitted a formal request to Egypt's Department of Antiquities for permission to begin a second-phase limited excavation. The response came quickly, and it was not what they expected. Within weeks, the project was suspended, their research license was revoked, and all further work on site was prohibited, officially. The reason was to preserve the structural integrity of the monument. Unofficially, it was over. Before leaving Egypt, Professor Yoshimura held a quiet press briefing in Cairo. Reporters noted the calm in his voice when he said, "We are sure these spaces are man-made." Then he returned to Tokyo, shortly after. The data disappeared from public archives. Only fragments of the report survived, a few printed graphs, a handful of scanned photos, and testimonies from those who remembered what the radar had shown. 2 nations, 10 years apart, the same chamber, the same silence, long before radar and satellites. The earliest explorers of Giza left behind another kind of record photographs in the 1920s. As archaeologists worked to free the Sphinx from centuries of sand, hundreds of black and white images were taken from every angle, documenting what the monument truly looked like before restoration. Most of those photos were later archived at the University of Chicago and the Brooklyn Museum. And yet, hidden within these forgotten negatives, modern researchers noticed something unusual. In several shots, dated between 1920 and 1925, the base of the Sphinx appears different from the one we see today. Beneath its paws, rows of rectangular stone blocks can be seen fitted in a deliberate pattern that does not match the natural bedrock surrounding it. The lines are too even, the joints too precise. Some archaeologists suggested they might be remnants of restoration work. Others, studying the texture and alignment, believed they looked more like sealed entrances, doors of stone meant to blend into the desert itself. But perhaps the most unsettling detail came not from the base, but from the Sphinx's head. In several photographs taken between 1925 and 1936, a circular opening, nearly 1 meter across, is clearly visible at the very top of the crown. The images are consistent across multiple angles and different photographers. The whole seems to descend vertically into the limestone, a feature never mentioned in official excavation reports. Then, during the restoration of the 1950s, it disappeared completely. The top of the Sphinx was reworked and smoothed over, and the opening was never seen again. Decades later, digital historians trying to access the original prints noticed another mystery. Around 1995, high-resolution scans of the Sphinx's head quietly vanished from several public archives. Museum databases removed direct download access to old negatives. Even mirrored copies began to disappear from academic repositories. The reason was never announced. Independent researchers proposed their own theories that the hole had been a maintenance shaft, or perhaps an air vent leading into an internal chamber. Others saw it differently. The precision, they argued, was no accident. It might once have served as an entrance now erased, brick by brick, from public memory. And as one historian quietly remarked, staring at the faded photograph on her monitor, sometimes the easiest way to erase history is to delete its image. By the mid-1930s, Egypt was in the middle of what historians now call its golden age of excavation. The sands of Giza had been stripped away, revealing monuments unseen for thousands of years, yet among the flood of discoveries, one report stood out and then disappeared. In 1935, the British newspaper Sunday Express ran a front-page headline that stunned its readers. Ancient City Beneath Egypt? The article quoted Dr. Selim Hassan, one of Egypt's most respected archaeologists at the time. Hassan described an extraordinary network of tunnels and chambers discovered during his excavations near the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, according to his notes. The passages extended deep into the bedrock corridors cut so precisely that even by modern standards, the stonework seemed mechanical. In his own words, certain sections were too perfect to be natural. Hassan's team documented several large rooms connected by straight passageways, some partially flooded by underground water. He speculated they might have served as ritual or storage spaces linked to the Sphinx complex. Yet after the report was published, no follow-up ever appeared. The story faded from the press, and the excavation records vanished into private archives. Just a year later, in 1936, a very different kind of scholar added another piece to the puzzle. Dr. Harvey Spencer Lewis, founder of the Rosicrucian Order, published a book titled The Symbolic Prophecy of the Great Pyramid. Within it, he included a hand-drawn map, a diagram of subterranean passages stretching approximately 426 meters, connecting the base of the Sphinx directly to the foundation of the Great Pyramid. At the center of this network, Lewis marked a circular chamber he called the Temple of Resurrection. He claimed the diagram was based on first-hand exploration conducted with the permission of the Egyptian authorities. But shortly after its publication, the book was withdrawn. Surviving copies were recalled, and the original drawing disappeared from the Rosicrucian archives. Only low-resolution photocopies remain scattered across a few private collections. Decades later, when researchers compared Lewis's 1936 sketch to the radar data obtained by Professor Yoshimura in 1987, the alignment was almost exact. The angles, depths, and chamber positions matched within meters. Two maps, drawn 50 years apart, one by hand, one by machine, both tracing the same hidden design. It was as if the ground itself had been whispering the same story all along. Two maps, drawn half a century apart, both tracing the same invisible city. By the end of the 20th century, the mysteries of Giza seemed to have settled into legend. Archaeologists had grown tired of speculation about hidden chambers and lost cities. And then, in 1999, everything changed for a few days. That year, Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's powerful and charismatic minister of antiquities, appeared on national television, standing in front of the Sphinx, surrounded by camera crews and reporters. He made a statement that sent shockwaves through the academic world. "We have found a multi-level structure beneath the Sphinx," he said, "about 30 meters deep." It was the confirmation many had waited decades to hear, a discovery that seemed to echo the forgotten words of Edgar Cayce and the strange prophecy of the boy from Mars. Within hours, international media picked up the story. Headlines spread across BBC, NBC, and Reuters, calling it the archaeological discovery of the century. For a brief moment, the impossible appeared to have become real. The world looked once again to Giza, waiting for the next announcement, the excavation, the photos, the proof. But that next announcement never came. Just weeks later, Dr. Hawass appeared again, this time with a very different tone. He denied the claim entirely, calling it a misunderstanding. There were no chambers, he said, no secret rooms, no discovery. The earlier broadcast, he insisted, had been taken out of context. Soon after, the original video was removed from the ministry's website. Egyptian newspapers received quiet orders not to revisit the topic. What had been called the find of the century vanished from public record as if it had never happened. Still, not everyone stayed silent. A group of French engineers who had partnered with the ministry that same year to conduct 3D subsurface scans later claimed that their data had been altered before release. In their private copies, the radar clearly showed multiple voids and corridors beneath the Sphinx, but in the official version published by Egyptian authorities, those same spaces were gone, replaced by the phrase solid limestone foundation. It was the final echo of a story that had repeated itself for nearly a century. Discovery, revelation, denial, silence. For a brief moment, the world saw what lay beneath. Then, just like that, it was gone. For nearly a century, the question has refused to die. From the black and white photographs of the 1920s to the radar scans of the 1980s and the vanished broadcast of 1999, the story keeps repeating different faces, different nations, the same forbidden silence. 4 generations of researchers have stood before the Sphinx, each one hearing the same faint signal beneath the stone. Each time they reached for proof. That signal was buried again in bureaucracy, denial, or dust. And yet the question endures. If there was nothing there, why keep it hidden? There are many theories. Some say the lost chamber is the Hall of Records, a vault of knowledge left behind by the survivors of Atlantis, containing the story of humanity's forgotten beginnings. Others believe it could be an ancient survival vault, a shelter carved into the earth by a civilization that knew catastrophe was coming. A few even suggest the Sphinx itself was built to mark the entrance of a monument above a machine, guarding a memory that predates written history. When you look at Giza from above, a pattern begins to emerge. The three Great Pyramids align perfectly with the stars of Orion's belt, while the curve of the Nile River mirrors the arc of the Milky Way. The ancients called this balance as above, so below. If the heavens reflected the divine order of the gods, then perhaps the ground beneath mirrored the knowledge of those who came before. The Sphinx may not have been built to gaze outward but downward, toward what lies beneath. In recent years, new technologies have begun to reopen the mystery. Muon scans, ground-penetrating radar, and satellite imaging in the 2020s have again detected anomalies beneath the Sphinx pockets of density that defy geological explanation. Official reports remain cautious, yet the data points where it always has under the right paw, deep into the bedrock. Maybe that's where the truth has always waited, not lost, only sealed. As the desert wind sweeps across the plateau, the Sphinx remains unmoving, half buried, half awake, a guardian of both time and silence. And somewhere beneath those ancient stones, the echo of a chamber still lingers, humming quietly beneath the earth. Maybe the Sphinx isn't guarding a tomb, but guarding a truth. And perhaps that truth isn't lost, only waiting to be remembered. The radar hums, a faint pulse flickers under the sand. And then, as the screen fades to black, the desert swallows the sound once more.